Kenyans.
Exactly.
Because as national treasurer, it's good to have a balance between the conditionalities that are being put by the Bretton Woods institutions and other lenders and the interests of Mwananchi. Because if you look at this bill, and I'm going to give an example of various impacts around now the eco-levy. If you look at it, you'll see the impact is quite huge. He has given an example of batteries. A battery that goes for 8,000 today, if you go to Kirinyaga Road, it's likely to go to 16,000, 17,000 shillings because there's imposition of 750 shillings per kg. And if a battery is 10 to 12 kgs, let's say 10 kgs, you take 750 shillings, multiplied by 10. That gives you an additional 7,500. If you add to the 8,000, it's in the region of 16,000, 15,000. See, that is 100% increment in terms of cost.
And this is coming at a time where there is an already imposed taxation on importation of motor vehicles. And then now the government is going to the inner parts of the curve, of the vehicle, of the motorcycle. Do you feel like this is double taxation?
It is, of course, because if you when you look at the motor vehicle levy, the 2.5% that has recently been introduced, you'll find it is duplicated from the import levy and other domestic taxes that you pay from the onset when you are either importing that vehicle or whether you're transferring that vehicle whose duties were already paid at a very high tunes, 25% of the value of the motor vehicle in terms of import or in terms of the import duty. We have excise duty on it. We have VAT and many other duties that are charged. So we find that the government is encroaching further into already acquired properties, and it is not good precedence because today we'll talk about the motor vehicle. Tomorrow we'll talk about an owner-occupier house that you have built yourself. But probably you'll be paying a certain levy on it, and many other instances here and there. So you find it's a bit duplicated, and it is really adding the burden on Mwananchi very much. And then it has also another negative implication. If it is the insurance companies that have been given the mandate of collecting this duty, you'll find people will start now doing a cost-benefit analysis. Are we going to stick with that party, or are we going to stick with comprehensive insurance? Because when you take the accumulated amount between the comprehensive insurance and the motor vehicle levy, if a vehicle is worth a million shillings, you'll find there's a 25,000 on a motor vehicle levy, and then there's insurance probably of 50,000. That is getting to the region of 70,000, whereby you have been paying 20 or 30,000 in terms of premiums in premium insurance for insurance. So one is likely now to make a logical economic argument and say, am I going to sustain this third party, this comprehensive insurance, or am I going to move to that party? Subsequently, is a very big loss to the insurance company. If they lose through third party applications instead of comprehensive application, I'm looking at the job losses in the insurance industry or that sector. I'm looking at a shutdown of companies because they are unable to, the bottom line has been affected, and so many other effects and impacts that are coming with this. So we need to have a different argument around that motor vehicle levy, whether it is going to be imposed on the private motor vehicle, or whether it's going to be imposed on commercial motor vehicle, whether it is the rate that is going to be reduced from 2.5% to 1%, is the whole discussion that we need to have with the government so that we don't overburden the Mwananchi.
Already Kenyans feel overburdened, but now the thing is, from motor vehicle tax, we're moving to edible oils. Do you find edible oil as a luxury?
Not really. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Now, when you look at the policy and why government is really going after this sector, they're saying we want to encourage local production. We want to encourage farmers to grow pyrethrum, to grow sorghum, to grow,
But so Menengai closing down.
But the problem is, and Kenya Association of Manufacturers already voiced that for local production to take place, it will take another 20 plus years for us to get to where we need to, the capacity that we'll need to. So I believe it is, yes, the right policy, but not the right time. Yes.
And what do you think, Job? We were talking about edible oil just the other time.
Yes. The government has pronounced itself on value chain integration. And through the Cabinet Dispatch of 2023 around April, edible oil was earmarked as one of the value chains, priority value chains for backward integration, whereby we need to grow the canola, the sunflower, the palm tree, so that we can do local production. The question is, today demand, can it be supplied by the local production? And if it cannot be supplied by the local production as of today, or when the finance bill will become effective on 1st of July 2024, you'll find that we'll have great efficiency in terms of supply, because the manufacturers who are importing the palm oil or the crude oil will now be importing it at a duty rate of 25% extra. That is an excise duty. So they may decide to shut down the operations, and then they shift their base to Uganda or Tanzania, whereby these duties have not been effected.
And that will allow illicit goods to come in, especially for illicit oil.
You'll find that even that is likely now to happen, because if you look at the opportunity cost, if you look at avoidance of the payment of duty and how much you will have avoided on your business, is very much. So you find even the governance issues are likely to come up.
Yes.
But that notwithstanding, let's argue from the demand and supply perspective. If you look at Uganda and Tanzania, the duty rate on this is about 2% on the crude palm oil. But for us, it has gone as high as 68% importation duty rate of crude palm oil. So if you look at that, you can really tell the effect that this is going to have on the production and on the consumption. Like now, a 20-liter jerrycan is moving from 3,700 Kenya shillings to 5,700 Kenya shillings. It's time that people start thinking of a consumption substitution.
Yes.
Rather than cooking without edible oil, you start thinking of something altogether, because I can prove that currently we don't have enough local supply. We need to look at a phase-out strategy, whereby we can say that in the next 10 years, we are going to be sufficient in terms of production, and then we can start looking at that duties. So as of today, it's just going to be punishment on ordinary Kenyans.
And away from motor vehicle, we've talked about eco levy. Now let's get to still on eco levy, because sanitary towels as well as diapers are set to increase, and it's one of the necessities for every household that have children and women and girls. For every kg of diapers produced by a factory, there's going to be an added 100 shillings excise tax. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so looking again at that one, and when you look at maybe just going back the history of diapers, 10 years ago, we used to import 100% of diapers. We didn't have local manufacturers. But then there were incentives that came into play, and we started, and we are currently producing mass diapers that can even be exported. We can, and you see, for exports, that will encourage for Forex to come into the country. But now when you start bringing in the eco levy and you're saying, I'm taxing this one, what the implications are dire. One, other than the increase in cost, people are looking at now, what are the number one, what are the alternatives? And even two, for manufacturers, will I go for cheaper products in terms of the raw materials? Because there is the raw materials that are used to make diapers. You have sorts of them. There are those that are imported. So manufacturers may even sort now to go for cheaper products. What will that mean? Even from a health perspective, we may be having very cheap, low quality diapers in the market.
Absolutely. And so also can move Kenya from being a self-reliant export country, to import-reliant country.
We're already a net importer, so we import more than we export, and that is why we have all these foreign exchange, the forex transactions. So, yes, as you mentioned, if we are going to increase or introduce this levy, will certainly perhaps limit local production. And what may happen is manufacturers may shift base to other countries. They may shift, and that means loss of jobs in Kenya as well as loss of forex.
Job from Kenya Association of Manufacturers, especially from the production side, what are they saying in regards to this? Because there is an already imposed tax even on diapers. What are they saying about this? Is this a double taxation, or the business is thriving enough for them to pay the tax?
It's hard to shoulder that burden on eco levy because we have some other duties that are that are charged on the same product. We, like what Gideon have said, we have seen growth in that sector, and we appreciate what has happened the last 10 years. The first company established in around 2013 or 2014. Now we are on the 6th company established in the country, and we have seen import substitution happening big time. But now we are likely to affect that growth, positive growth that we have seen, whereby we have enormous people who have been employed in these companies. Now the eco levy is shifting just a leaf of a diaper from an average of 20 shillings to 25 shillings, and someone may think of now moving back to the nappies that are
contemporary ways.
Contemporary ones. And we're not saying that they are bad, but you find that if you move to the nappies, there is no economic ripple effect. Factories will shut down. The transportation, those companies that are in the logistics will shut down. We have those who are employed in some of these sectors. So it's good to stick to the diapers, but as we're sticking to them, it's not necessary that we have to impose this duty. We were in talks with some other sectors who are saying that we are ready to mop up in the diapers themselves, and we can use them as energy for ourselves. So why move too fast? We have a producer responsibility organization in place. We have some companies that are committing to mop up the diapers, and they can use them for energy production, rather than the way we are saying that we are going to impose a levy so that it can be collected from the public. So it is not an effect on the manufacturers themselves. It's a big effect on the children. It's a big effect on the mothers. It's a big effect on the family in general.
So most of the stuff that have really been even moved from being zero rated are pertinent. They're super important, including bread, including even sanitary towels and diapers. But now from there we can also move to one of the concerns that we had and came out prominently during the tabling of the Public Participation Finance Committee was the transaction fees increased for the banking sector. Let me pick your thoughts on that, Gideon. What do you think? Yeah,
so when you look at some of the proposed amendments in the finance bill, as you mentioned, in the financial sector, let me call it the financial sector, and cover both the banking as well as the insurance sector. So there is a proposal to ideally delist certain items from the exemption listing. And perhaps maybe this will take me to the national tax policy as well as the medium-term revenue strategy paper. When you look at those two papers, the government is looking into the future and saying we need to limit the number of exemptions that are being provided, limit perhaps to production, limit to people who intend to produce but not for consumption. Now, coming back to the banking industry you mentioned, so items such as currently when you are procuring your debit or credit card, it is VAT exempt. There's no VAT on that one. But then there's a proposal that there'll be VAT when you're going to procure that card. Foreign exchange transaction, what does this mean? Any foreign exchange transaction, if there is a fee perhaps that is being charged, then there is VAT again that will be levied on that one. There will be far much reaching implications.
Does this mean that really the cost of transaction, even for a common mwananchi who is using bank transfer to M-Pesa, is that cost going to go high?
It's definitely going to go high. So like that is just VAT on the financial services. I've not talked about the excise duty on the telecommunication, on the likes of M-Pesa being increased from the 15 to 20%. So there is again an increase. What this means is at the end of the day, the transaction fees that that are currently in play will possibly, not even possibly, will most likely go higher. Reason being, the distributors of these products will not really shield on and say we are taking on these taxes. A majority of them will want to push them to that very final consumer, and hence the cost of that transaction fee will most likely go high.
And also, even before we go to the other side,
Yeah.
I would like to pick your thoughts as well, Job, in regards to that. Just a quick one before we go to the other side on the same transaction fees for local monarch.
Yes, thanks. If you look at the Monetary Policy Committee report of the recent report that was released about 5 days ago, it shows that the base lending rate stands at 13%.
Yeah.
That means the interest rates are still high. Over and above that,
Okay.
when you revise the transaction fee, I can bet
Okay.
that the cost of capital.
But
is
before I
going-
let you finish that,
more
Job,
expensive.
sorry, I keep cutting you off.
Yes.
Just a few minutes, because we have K24 speaking right now in Treasury. Would like to hear what he has to say about this particular day as well as their preparation. Let's listen in.
Then 30th September, we issue a report. We call it Budget Review Outlook Paper, BROP. Budget Review Outlook Paper. This is a budget document that is futuristic. It says first, this is our medium-term expenditure framework. So this is a ceiling that we have for resources, and each sector therefore is going to be operating in this manner. And we also look at that medium-term framework based on what we project as a macro environment. What is inflation? What is growth? What do we see revenue going? How do we expand? All those macro parameters. So we issue in that report. Then now we tell entities, proceed now and go and engage in your sectors based on the ceilings which have been provided. So you'll find that we have, for instance, we have about 10 sector working groups. So one, if we talk about security, we have another one called public administration and international relations. We have another one that is what we say GJLOs, governance, justice, law and order. That brings in all the, then agriculture, then health, then education. All those, so all those go together. They go, and now, because ministries are grouped together, they elect a chair and a co-chair and their secretariat. Treasury is only there to take notes. We don't participate in giving contributions. We only take notes and provide guidance within the fiscal framework. So those bidding for resources goes on, and it's a 2-month process, October, November. By November, we now have a consolidation of what has come on, and we now begin to prepare a budget policy statement, draft. This is a draft that, once it's ready, needs to be subjected to public consultation. So we do what is called public hearings. So you've heard us, we call the public and we say, here is the budget policy statement, which has the medium-term framework of how we want to do our revenue, raise our revenues and do also expenditure. How much we are going to borrow, all those.
That's the most popular part that people now start engaging.
Now they engage. We call them public hearings. And in these hearings, we take into account what the people say. Then we now revise the budget policy statement to reflect what the public hearings are, what came out of public hearings. Then we come back to cabinet. We say, cabinet, this is now our draft budget policy statement, which we need to submit to parliament. Please approve. So parliament and the cabinet approves. So we have a constitutional timeline that by 15 February, we must submit the budget policy statement to parliament. So we submit to parliament. Then parliament quickly goes through and approves, because we cannot go to do budget making without approval of parliament to say, okay, this is fine, the budget policy statement has been approved. So we now communicate to ministries to say, now proceed to prepare your budget in accordance with the budget policy statement, because that has been approved by parliament. So ministries, again, based on the sectors, go and prepare, and now culminating in what we call budget estimates, which constitutionally are supposed to be submitted to parliament by 30th April. And we did that, we were able to work around and make sure that 30th April we now have a budget that we submitted. So 30th April is submit to Parliament together with revenue raising measures which are contained in the finance bill. The famous finance bill that is everybody is talking about. So in this finance bill, if there is additional expenditure from the previous year, it means you have to indicate where you're going to get the resources. And that is why the finance bill is proposing new tax measures that will then give it resources to be able to finance the budget. So 30th April goes through, then Parliament now goes through public hearings. Now the ball is in Parliament. It listens to the public, but then we are now ready today with the minister, my cabinet secretary, ready to go and read the budget statement, the budget speech in Parliament, which he's going to do this afternoon. And then he has tabled all documents before Parliament, but he will just read publicly so that Kenyans get to know what is in contained. Although majority already know, because now we are running a very transparent budget making process. But today is within the EAC calendar, so it's a simultaneous reading of budget speech by Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan, and even DRC, because we now have more members of EAC. So after today, there will be now debate by Parliament on the budget making process. There is also finance bill that we appeared before the committee just 2 days ago, and they are going for a retreat now. I think next week they will now bring on table the finance bill for adoption by the House. To go the first reading, second reading, third, and then the full House will adopt. And that will be now the bill that must be passed by 30th of June. And so that is the process. And once the Parliament approves, we now get what we call a vellum, something that tells us Parliament has now approved. This is the budget for implementation. So we now come back, which is July, again now to issue a circular now to say this is the budget. And we applaud in IFMIS for everybody to access their budget, and then we now implement. That is the process of budget making. I may have left out many things, but I just want to recognize that the team from Treasury works so hard. I have never seen it. I don't think there is any segment of Kenyan society that is overworked like National Treasury officials. They work so hard, we don't have holiday. I don't have sleep myself as PS, but that applies also to most of my staff. We sleep late, wake up early, but that's public service. We have to serve the public, and we have to do more than call of duty.
Which is why I wanted to ask you, you talked about the expenditure part, which is the appropriations bill, and the revenue part, which is the finance bill. Perhaps you can let our viewers know what are the technicalities that go about coming up with the final document, if perhaps maybe the proposals you had earlier are not coming back how you had.
Yes, yeah. So we have the appropriations bill. That appropriations bill is not necessarily the same as what Treasury presented. We will have presented, and what we present is not coming from Treasury. Many people sometimes think it is us. We don't just sit and say this much, this much. I've told you the process. It's a consultative process. But even when we submit, Parliament also has its room to engage the public, because constitutionally Parliament has a role on budget making. So they will go through and appropriate. The appropriation may be different, and if there is substantial difference, what do? We just go with what Parliament has approved. But to a large extent, we try and work with them to make sure that they support what the government, the executive, is also pushing, because there are certain things that we want to achieve. And I want to thank this Parliament now, because at least the budget that is going to be read today is 3.3% in terms of budget deficit. We have really shrunk from 5.7 to 3.3%. That means there is a lot of sacrifice, especially on expenditures.
That in figures is
So the figure now is going to be 3.992 trillion. And this is a Parliament had approved 4.2 trillion under the budget policy statement, but now we have proposed to reduce from 4.2 to 3.99, so about over 200 billion reduction in expenditure. And this is what Parliament is considering, a reduced budget from what it had approved through the BPS, because we are saying that we need to reduce the deficits that we are carrying, because when we have large deficits we take it through debt, and our debt carrying capacity now is quite low. We have reached the limit in terms of how much debt we can borrow. If we continue doing it, we might find ourselves in a situation where we may not be able to pay, and that has serious consequences. You have had countries defaulting. We don't want Kenya to be in that situation where we default. And already the burden of paying our debt is huge. I can tell you in this budget that the 3.922 trillion, 750 billion is going to be to pay domestic interest, and 260 billion will be used to pay external interest. So in total we have 1.01 trillion interest payments. If you divide that as percent of total the 3.99, that is almost 30%, almost 30% or 25%. I think it's almost 18% there. But if you look at it from revenue, because you have to pay from revenues, which is our revenues here in this budget, we are talking about 2.917. We are talking about 30% of what we will get from Kenya Revenue Authority is going to be used to pay interest payments, not principal. When we combine principal, and this is, I'm using the current figures I use now, every 10 shillings we get from Kenya Revenue Authority, we are using 6 shillings to pay debt. So continued widening of deficit, meaning taking more debt, and that means taking more of the revenues in the future and shrinking amount of money that can be used to fund roads, education, and areas, in fact, for development. Because budget should also be used to fund development. That's how we grow as a nation. If we are just using expenditure, recurrent expenditure, salaries, and interest payment, really the impact is not much. So we need to live within our means. It's a reality that I don't think it helps to blame game here and there, because this is where we are. We have taken much more than we can afford, and we are saying let's reduce. We know it's not quick. We cannot just say do a balanced budget. That's the aspiration. We would like to run a balanced budget where what we get, we just use it to finance and without need to borrow. But it's not practical. We have to go. So that's why we say over the medium term, we are doing a fiscal consolidation. Fiscal consolidation means make efforts to raise more revenue, make efforts to contain expenditure, so that you live within your means, and if you have to borrow, you borrow less. And that is the spirit. So it's a trilemma that we are in, where we talk about debt, expenditure, and taxation. And this is a big debate, because everybody wants more money. This budget, and I have a report here that came out of the budget hearings, that process, we have over 600, about 550 billion shillings we could not consider in the budget, because it is outside the ceilings that was given. So it means there are more wants. Ministries want to do more, but they could not. Most activities, most programs, most projects could not find their way into the budget. We have reduced. But the pressure is everybody. That's why I was telling colleagues in Parliament, even MPs, I said, I know, even for CDF, they always want us to pay quickly. But it's also money that must come from the tax. So everybody wants, even I know the Kenyans that are there now, I'm watching me now. In your village, you want the road. In your village, you want the water. You want the electricity. So the wants are many. But that expenditure will have to be financed through revenues. And revenues, or if we don't raise enough, we take debt. We have said we have less room for debt. This is why the focus is on raising revenues, and we are talking about tax measures. Because there is a debate here to have. There are still quite a number of people in our country that are not complying with the tax laws. They are not in the tax bracket. And we need to do more education and awareness on why they need to be there. And I know they ask the right question, which is about accountability for taxes. It's a good question to ask, that when we spend in a way that Kenyans are happy. I think that's a good debate. But let's raise the revenue, which is why I think I welcome the debate around tax. People are saying we are overtaxed. We measure, as economists, we measure overtaxation when it comes to how much tax you raise vis-a-vis the income or the GDP of the country. Ours now, in this budget, we are talking about 15%. And we want to raise to 25%. So we are not yet there. Of course, when you, maybe a few Kenyans, like I am salaried, so and a few others who are paying salary, maybe you get income tax, and you also, those who are feeling probably overtaxed are the few that are paying salaries, and it's a debate. We were saying let's bring more, so support measures that can bring more Kenyans, because I'm very sure if we have most people pay the tax bracket, we can actually generate more revenue to meet our expenditure needs, and we don't need to really be borrowing. And so I welcome you, the media. I say, please, let's educate, because I see sometimes too much noise. Maybe there is merit, but from where I sit as somebody in Treasury, I think there is room for, there are many, what I call informal economy, a lot of informal activities that are not getting in the tax bracket. Too much cash economy. That, and for every activity, there has to be a transaction. Every transaction government has to get something.
And therefore,
Yeah.
maybe perhaps,
Yeah.
what are those inevitabilities that now maybe Kenyans should foresee? Maybe from where you sit, how long will these kind of pressures persist? And if with their projections they go well, when will we start getting internal revenues that are higher than expenditure?
Actually, I see the fact that we have really worked last year, even this year, there's a lot of focus on this. And you can see already care areas is growing at 15%. The revenues are growing. And the full impact of the tax measures that have been put in place have not necessarily been felt. It takes time. There are lags in effect. For instance, measures last year that were approved by Parliament, we had a court case. It took a few months, maybe about a month for the court to lift, and then we were able to implement. Some measures were not beginning in July. Some were beginning in September. Some were beginning in this January to be implemented. So the full impact of those measures have not necessarily been felt. But we have seen a 63% in progress in implementing those tax measures for last year. And even with these ones, if they are approved and we implement, and I'm sure Parliament has listened, some are saying don't have cash circulation. We don't mind. If there is another alternative, what we have just urged Parliament is that please, whatever comes out, consider that we need the yields that will be enough to finance the budget that will be read today by the minister. And if Parliament approves that budget, then we must find ways. But measures can change based on what the public has said. And I'm sure Parliament will exercise its judgment and be able to give us an outcome. So that is really where we are. And I think my final word to Kenyans is that I think all is not lost, Kenyans. It's a good debate to talk about tax. And I think while you ask how the money has been used, it's a good debate through your MPs and others who are representing you. Those are the questions you ask. Through the media, we need to be put into account. But I think let us encourage everyone to pay taxes. Even that, sometimes people who are crying, oh, tax, we have a tax. Themselves, even they are not affected by this. Let everybody come in, pay. And I can tell you, if all of us are complying with the tax laws, we pay, we have enough revenue. Because our growth, the growth of our economy is doing very well. we have 5.6% of GDP, and we have in the last 10 years, our economy has grown over 5% in 7 years. Only in 3 years did we perform below 5%. But you don't see that growth consistent with what we are getting as tax from the same economy. So we need to get more, but the growth is there. We have also worked hard to contain the inflation. In October 2022, inflation was 9.6%. The pass-through effects were huge because inflation, because of exchange rate, which was weakening. By January this year, we were talking about an exchange rate of 165 shillings per dollar. That was really huge. And it was caused by the fear of failure to settle the Eurobond, which in February, we came in and decided we have to go to the market, issue and buyback. And it was a very successful buyback that we were looking for $1.5 billion to pay the $2 billion that we had, and we got $6.2 billion. Oversubscription of 413%. That's a reflection that we are still rated well out there by investors. And we can afford that. And even immediately after that, we still got an infrastructure board that was oversubscribed by 413. So you see, there is confidence in our economy, and you have seen that the exchange rate has come from 165. It has now stabilized at 130. In fact, this week it was coming at 129, and inflation has come down from 9.6, now is 5%. In fact, it could be coming to below 5%. Of course, helped by petroleum prices, which have come down, and then cost of food items, which because of good rates, and also because of measures taken by government to ensure we have adequate fertilizer and other supporting mechanisms. I think the macro environment is looking good. Investors have come back. Look at our capital markets now. Look at who is participating in the NSE. We see quality investors beginning to come in. So if we really support our nation, I think Kenya is a great country. We need to make sure that we continue providing that leadership in the region. We are now number 6, I think, in terms of size of economy in Africa, and we should be able to attract investments and grow our nation. So let's believe in our nation, Kenyans. I urge us to be bipartisan, because inflation does not see where you are. It doesn't matter which region you are or which political divide you are. We just need to all agree. In fact, as you elect your leaders, it should be, what strategies do they have?
Well, that has been the Principal Secretary, Treasury, Chris Kipto, just giving us an overview of what to expect today. Remember, just to put this into context, is that the budget reading 2024-2025 will be happening right here in the parliamentary buildings. And we've pitched camp here just to bring you the latest on what will be happening throughout the day, and we have a wall-to-wall coverage in regards to that. So we'd like to have you here until the end of this particular session. But before that, let's hear from the Swahili people. Mariam, hujambo, and chukua usukani, watu wanasemaje huko?
Naam, shukran sana Linda Kosgei, ambaye ni mwanahabari wa masala ya uchumi pamoja na biashara katika runinga K24, ambaye yuko pale katika bunge la taifa akituletea taarifa mubashara kuhusiana na kitu gani ambacho kitakuwa kinajiri pale ifikapo saa 9, ambapo tunamuona waziri wa hazina ya taifa Njuguna Ndung'u akifika pale kuwasilisha bajeti ya pili ya utawala wa Rais William Ruto katika bunge, jambo ambalo limeanza kuzua mjadala mavu kuhusiana na kule kufadhiliwa kwa bajeti hiyo na ile mswada wa fedha wa mwaka 2024. Bajeti hiyo ni ya kima ya takriban shilingi trilioni 3.9. Ni jambo ambalo nitakuwa nalizungumzia hapa kiundani zaidi. Jina langu ni Mariam Jahid, na kama ilivyokuwa ni makala spesheli kuhusiana na bajeti ya mwaka 2024 na mwaka 2025. Kwa moyo mkunjufu nakaribisha katika matangazo haya maalum ambapo tutakuwa tunakupatia fursa, mpenzi mtazamaji, sauti yako isikike. Maana niko na wanahabari wenza ambao katika kaunti 47 ambao watakuwa wananisaidia tu kujua je, matarajio ya Wakenya ni yapi kabla ya bajeti ya mwaka huu kusomwa. Na ndani ya studio, mpenzi mtazamaji, niko na wageni pamoja na wataalamu wa masuala ya ushuru wanisaidie tu kudadavua kiundani zaidi kuhusiana na hii bajeti ya mwaka 2024 na mwaka 2025. Lakini kabla tujaingia pale, mpenzi mtazamaji, kuna kile ambacho tunapaswa tu kufahamu. Je, ni kipi ambacho kikatika ile sanduku ya Njungu na Ndungu? Kwa hivyo wacha tu nikupatie ni kitu gani ambacho utakuwa unakitarajia tu kukiona saa chache kutoka sasa, ambapo makadirio ya bajeti ya mwaka huu katika sekta mbalimbali kulingana na mgao wake. Bajeti ya mwaka huu mahakama itakuwa inatengewa takriban shilingi bilioni 24.6, na katika ofisi ya rais itakuwa inatengewa takriban kima cha shilingi bilioni 5.1. Tukisonga mbele, sekta mbalimbali, kuna idara ya polisi imetengewa kima cha shilingi milioni 110.5 bilioni, na katika elimu ya juu tumeona ni takriban shilingi bilioni 127.9, na uchukuzi imetengewa kima cha takriban bilioni 51.6. Kumbuka kwamba hizi ni fedha ambazo zimetengwa katika mgao sekta mbalimbali, ambapo ushuru wa mkate pia utakuwa umepingwa na wengi. Maana yake wengi wamesema kuwa kufadhili bajeti basi itakuwa inawakandamiza na watabebeshwa ushuru. Kumbuka kwamba bajeti hii, bajeti ya Ikulu, ofisi ya rais, naibu wake, imeongezwa kwa takriban bilioni 1.289. Na katika sekta ya elimu, ambapo nilikuwa nimekuambia hata kama umeona pale ni pesa nyingi, lakini sekta hiyo ya elimu imepunguziwa mgao wake kwa shilingi bilioni 30.45. Na katika mgao wa kilimo, ambapo ndio uti wa mgongo wa uchumi, huo mgao umepunguzwa kwa takriban shilingi bilioni 14.65. Na sekta afya, ambayo ni sekta ambayo imekuwa ikizungumziwa kuhusiana na mpito kutoka bima ya NHIF kuelekea bima ya SHIF, sekta hiyo imepunguziwa mgao wake kwa takriban bilioni 7.8. Ni jambo ambalo nitakuwa nikikupeletea tu kiundani zaidi. Je, nambari ambazo unaziona pale katika mtandao wako ama kwenye kiwambo chako ni zinakusaidia vipi kama Mkenya wa kawaida, ama zitakuathiri vipi hasa kiuchumi? Katika sekta ya Wizara ya Afya imetengewa mgao wake wa shilingi bilioni 131, na sekta ya ulinzi imetengewa takriban shilingi bilioni 173. Sekta michezo nayo haijaachwa nyuma, imetengewa shilingi bilioni 17.7. Serikali za magatuzi zimefaidika sana, manake hapo awali zilikuwa zimetengewa bilioni 385, lakini hivi sasa zimetengewa bilioni 400. Ni jambo ambalo tutakuwa tunakuzungumzia tu kuhusiana na namna itakuwa na kuathiri. Kumbuka kwamba hii bajeti ni bajeti ya pili ya utawala wa Rais William Ruto tangu aingie mamlakani, lakini kulingana na kile ambacho kimekuwa kikitengwa kutoka miaka ya hapo nyuma, tumeona bajeti ya mwaka 2022, mwaka 2023 tuliona bajeti ilikuwa imetengewa takriban trilioni 3.4. Kisha baadaye mwaka 2023, mwaka 2024 bajeti ikatengewa kima cha takriban trilioni 3.7, lakini mwaka huu itakuwa ni takriban trilioni 4. Ni jambo ambalo wengi wameanza kushikwa na ile shauku. Je, tutawezaje kufadhili bajeti hii ambayo ni kubwa kulingana na historia ya bajeti humu nchini? Ndani ya studio, mpenzi mtazamaji, nimekuambia niko na wageni ambao watanisaidia tu kutafsiri zile idadi za bajeti. Lakini kwanza tuelekeze macho katika kaunti ya 001, ambapo nitakuwa naungana na mwanahabari mwenza Frederick Kai. Atakuwa anatangamana na wakazi wa kaunti ya Mombasa watuelezee matarajio yao kabla bajeti